That is very important, and that puts a lot of responsibility on the man if you have a mate that looks up to you and willing to follow you. Now, and that mate has put trust in you that you would be able to make right decision, but yet at the same time, if you make a wrong decision, she will not ostracize you or put you down. She's always there because we're all human. And it knows that mistakes are made. But in other words, and if you be in the head, acknowledge your mistake and be of the mindset that I know where I made my mistake and I'm making amends. You have somebody on your side that you go forward. Amen. And I just want to say this, that's not my message, but I just want to say this, is that some of you know that my situation and my wife's situation is that we were at one point almost homeless. We lost everything, every piece of property I had, even to the point I didn't even have a job. She didn't have a job. We didn't have a place to go. I was losing my house. In other words, and then we had to go and find a place. She found the place. I didn't find it. She found the place. And at first I understand that the lady was not going to rent to us. But then she found favor with the caretaker. And then she spoke up for it. And then I understand that the owner said that, well, if it don't work out, it's on you. But we were one of her best tenants. God provided. And all I'm saying, from that point on, where I was only bringing in, including with my wife, we were only bringing in less than $1,000 a month. And the place we're renting was $750 a month.
But look at God.
But look at God. Hallelujah. I had something from an early age that I didn't know would be beneficial. But it came to pass and it helped me in that time. And I'll tell you about that in a minute. And this is what I'm going to speak about tonight is coming from Matthew's 25th chapter. 25th chapter. Let me give you a little background. This is Jesus was to a point where it was almost time for him to finish his ministry. And his ministry was going out. And his disciples had come to him because he had given he had rebuked the scribes. He had rebuked the Pharisees. He had told them, in other words, what was going to come to pass and what was going to happen to them. And now his disciples are coming to him and ask him, when, Master, are these things going to take place? Is that time when you're going to come in and restore us? And Jesus didn't answer them totally, but he gave them a parable. The first parable he gave them was about 10 virgins. And about, they were virgins, meaning that they were in the church. They were one that were following him. They were disciples. They were the ones that were saying, Lord, we're going to be with you. They had lamps. In other words, they knew how to trim it. They knew everything. But 5 was foolish. Why were they foolish? They didn't have everything they needed. They had the physical mechanism. Oh, but they didn't have that oil. They didn't have what the master was coming for in the end. What was the master coming for in the end? He was coming for a lamp to be lit. In other words, like showing the way. They didn't have the oil to do that. But that's not my message tonight. It's coming from the 14th verse. For the kingdom of heaven is as a man. And anytime we see the word as, no, that's a metaphor. Is the simile. Is means equal. Okay, this is like a metaphor. I am taking this man and putting him as if he is the kingdom of heaven. Kingdom of heaven and kingdom of God are two different things. We have the kingdom of God in us. But the kingdom of heaven that he's speaking of here is about something that this man was going to prepare. And you know what Jesus said? In other words, that in my Father's house are many mansions. and that he was going away to prepare a place for us. But let me finish this. And it says, for the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling to a far country, who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods. And unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to every man according to his several abilities. And straightway, mean right away, he took his journey. My question to you is, what is your gift? What I want to say here is that what this supposes is that this man who was going on a journey had already prepared his servants to be able to take and do whatever he was doing in his absence. They have been prepared to go about and do all the things. They're with the master for a while. They knew how to go about and put the money out, bring things in, how to govern, how to put things in order. They knew that, all of them. And he, the master, knew their abilities. So he didn't give them all the same amount because he didn't want to overwhelm them. He didn't want them to become discouraged because of things they couldn't do or couldn't handle. But he gave them according to their ability. And when they did this, in other words, he says that he went away straightway. And think about this. Look how long Jesus was on the earth, 3 years, and he's preparing his disciples all this time. And even at the time of his, going to the cross, they still did not totally understand. And even at the time of his resurrection, when he was going up, they still didn't totally believe. So I'm saying, don't break yourself down too much because of unbelief or doubt. In other words, because there were things that they still needed that they hadn't gotten yet. There was something they needed. When we talked about those 5 foolish virgins, there was something they needed that they didn't have. So now, but look what they did. Now let's look at this maybe as I look at these talents as being an ability, an earthly ability to be able to do something productive and to be able to be good to mankind. Now, and in another scripture, it goes on down, and it says that it said it was money. And I happen to have $1 here. And one thing this dollar is for. What does it say? Have you ever read it? This debt, this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. So mean, hey, this is what they wanted to try and get more of. Public and private, get this and make it bigger. And so now, what happened? You know what happened. The one with the 5 talents, what did he do? Oh, it could have been a woman too. What did she do? The servant. It went out and was happy to get these 5 and went out with all the ability, with all that they knew, all they could handle. And I'm pretty sure they were astounded that, wow, I'm getting more. And they just kept on working. And what happened? They even got more to the point that it doubled. And then the one with the 2 didn't have as much as the one with the 5, and it did not compete with the one with the 5. In other words, and it did what it could do. Don't worry about what you're doing. You may not be able to stand here and be a great orator. You may not be able to preach like Dr. both Harton and Harton. But the thing is this, do what you can do and do it with all your ability. Because you know what Martin Luther King said, that no matter what you are, do it with all your ability. And it goes on, and it says, but the one with the 2, he or she was surprised, and it doubled. What did the one with the 1 do? What did the one with the 1 do? He took the talent, at least he didn't lose it, but he didn't work it. And it just went in the ground. And when it came back, he says, Lord, I knew you were one that was a hard man, In other words, that you didn't, you're going to ask for things that you didn't, you didn't work for and everything like this. And I became afraid. You know that's not the Spirit of God. And because I was afraid, I didn't do anything. And you know what? Here's this one time. You can have it back now. And what did he call him? You wicked, unprofitable, slothful servant. Oh, why was he that? He said, look, you know what you could have done? You could have just gone there and just let interest build up, and I would have my talent and interest. You may not be able to walk around and preach. You may not be able to go around to these different places, but you could put a sign up and say, Jesus saves. There's always something that we can do. Don't look at the ones that, is doing all these great things and having great things come about. Do what you can do. And do it with all your heart. Because this is what happened. Just a sign that's standing out saying Jesus saves. You want to know why it works? Because it's not you. It's God. It's the word that's going to bring them in. It's the word that's going to do the work. In other words, these servants, their talent increased, but it was God that gave the increase. Yes. So whatever we are doing, think about it's God that's giving the increase. In other words, don't think about, my position. And this is one thing that helped me when Sister Kim talked to me and gave me the encouragement, because I was saying, I'm just a deacon. Why am I up here? Yeah. And so, in other words, but I was coming from this point. I was looking at, I wanted to be ministered to. I wanted the ministers to come up and speak. I wanted to give, I looked at this as being, I'm taking the place of one of them. And I didn't want that to happen. But you know what? I am at a point now that I'm thinking that I have a talent. I may not really recognize that talent, but as long as somebody else does, then God can get the credit. And that's all I'm after, is God get the benefit. And whatever I say and whatever point that I make, I want God to get the benefit. Now, let's talk about some of the things a little bit further. What are some of the gifts? Now, these are the material things that I have. And look, let me go on and finish this story, then I'll go into this other part. In other words, in the one with the 10, with the 5, double it. One with the 2, double it. And then when he called this slothful, wicked person, and he said he's going to cast him into outer darkness. If the kingdom of heaven is the place, a dwelling place, that we would be able to go in and out, and where God would be our Father and we would be his Son, then they're going to be without that. And what is outer darkness? Being separated from God. I cannot imagine. Look, they call it darkness because Jesus is light. And if he's not there, it has to be dark. And not only that, but he said there's going to be a gnashing of teeth. Yes. There's going to be weeping. They're not going to forget what they didn't do. They're not going to forget what they did do. All that stuff that they did. Thank God we ain't going to remember all the bad things that happened. We're not going to, in other words, it says we're not going to have no weeping. There won't be any pain. Won't be any death. In other words, in order for that not to be pain, your memory has to be wiped out. Because I could think about things that hurt me way back, and and I think about it now and I get sad. But I'm not going to be sad. You're not going to be sad. Why? Because your memory will be wiped out. We can't wipe our memory out. I can't forget some of the things that happened to me. I can't forget some of the things that I did, even though I would love to. But in other words, on this side of earth, heaven, I cannot do it. But all that will be wiped away. Those that will not be part of Christ, it appears they will not forget. To me, that is torture just in itself. Forget about the lake of fire. Oh, there's something else. Man, that's too much. And the lake of fire was only made for the devil and his angels. But one scripture says that hell has enlarged itself. Why? It's making room for some of us that shouldn't be there. So now, let me talk about what I really feel is my heart, is entrepreneurship. And one of the scriptures that I want to use is that in Joel, where it says that, hey, in other words, in the last day, I'm going to pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters are going to prophesy. Your old men's going to dream dreams, and the young men are going to have visions. Okay, look at us. There's a lot of old people in here. I'm one of them. I have some dreams. But what is the likelihood of me having that dream materialize? Very little. Because why? Does that mean the dream should die? No. Then what am I to do? Who has the strength? The young people have the vision. They have a means of knowing how to put it together. So we need to share our dreams with the youngsters who may be able to take it further. Give you an example. I've always thought about a restaurant, cooking, soul food. We know how bad it is. We know how bad soul food is. But look at it this way. Look at some of this other stuff that's out there that's bad. But why is it that people flocking to that and eating it? One reason. That person who is fixing it is a culinary art, an artist. They put the number of calories that's on a dish. They put it in a way that it looks appealing. What we need, take my dream, go to culinary school, and figure out how you can make soul food appealing. How you going to put this? And then you have people coming. And it's not a matter of how many calories something is. It's a matter of how often you eat those calories. Yeah. And so all I'm saying is that, in other words, don't let your dream. In other words, there may be time. Not everybody is going to go to college. But think about this. What about a youngster who likes to work with his hands? Have you ever thought about going to being an electrician, being a plumber? The jack of all trades is good, but it ain't going to get many jobs. Why? Because you don't have the piece of paper. You got to get the piece of paper. And so, in other words, it reminds me of a person that many of you know him, and he is an electrician that's retiring now. But he came along at a time he had just gotten out of service. And he didn't know what he was going to do, but this old man says, have you ever thought about being an electrician? He said, I don't know nothing about electricity. He said, well, that's why you need to go to school. And you know what? He went. And he became, first he was an apprentice, worked for a while, then he became a journeyman, and he worked for over 30 years. He's getting so many retirements. He's getting over 3 separate retirements that he didn't even know that they were putting away from just doing something that he learned to do. He got the piece of paper. Yes, sometimes he had to go to a city that he didn't want to be in. He lived out here, but he had to go up to Barstow. He may have to go up to Bakersfield, but that's okay. And not only that, but then you have something that you could give back to somebody else. Right. Why? Because you're taking care of yourself. Now you can also be an inspiration to somebody else. Yeah. And this is what we hear. We need to leave a legacy. That's right. If there's no legacy left, then it's as if you never was alive. Who would know you? Who would call your name? Who would be able to say, I'm here because of this particular person? You may not have a great and glorious mission, maybe like, Jeremiah. Jeremiah, think about him. He was a kid, and what the first thing he said, Lord, I can't go, I'm a child. And then what did God say? Look, I knew you before you were formed in your mama's belly. And you're going to give a message to a people, and you know what? They ain't going to hear you. And you said, but I'm telling you this. I'm going to take these coals and I'm going to put them on your lip. And when I put them on your lips, then in other words, then you can go and don't be afraid of their faces. When you're not afraid of their faces, then they can't do you no harm. Why? Because God said he would protect us. In other words, all it is that they may roar up. They may come very, very big. But if it's not in God's will, there is nothing that they can do to you as far as harm will come. I'm not going to say that it's going to be bed of roses, but at the same time, you will have some type of joy that, in other words, I don't know what it is. I can't give it to you, but you will have so much satisfaction that it is much greater than any other comfort that you may get. Because that was something that Paul said. In other words, when he was talking about, in other words, people eating meat that was offered up to idols. In other words, some of the people did not, they could not take that. In other words, but it was one of these things where God has already cleansed it. Meat ain't gonna destroy you as far as spiritual is concerned. You just may go to the grave a little bit earlier physically because of the certain things you're eating. But spiritually, it will not harm you. But he said this: if it offends my brother, I will never eat while the earth exists. Why? Because he loved his brother more than he did meat. And this is the thing. In other words, when you find something that you love, Paul loved the gospel. Paul loved this word. So when you get to the point where you have a gift that you love, in other words, whatever will come about that would try and destroy that, you will do it, you will get rid of it. See, this is one of the things that is so important for us to remember, is that, in other words, I don't try and tell people what not to do. I try and tell them, get involved in something that you love to do. Because then that'll take care of the not to do. In other words, and so when you're doing that, then in other words, when something is taken away, then that void has to be filled with something. And if it's not filled with something, then you know what's going to happen. You're going to go back to what you were comfortable at doing. That's why so many people go back to where they were. Because they didn't have anything in its place. Why so many men, not women, but men, when they retire, they die early. They ain't got nothing to do. That's all they did was work. Find something else to do. In other words, before you retire, because I'm telling you, you're not going to find it after you retire. Because, you find it before you retire and get involved in it. Yeah. And then it goes on to say, you may not even be like Ezekiel that saw God in a whirlwind. When he was in this whirlwind, he saw God coming and all this and everything like this, and he lost all strength. And you know what God told him to do? I want you to eat the whole roll. What was the roll? That was the word that I was going to give to Israel, because Israel was going away from God. I want you to eat this whole roll. And you know what? It's going to be sweet in your mouth. Oh, but when you get down to your belly and when you have to give it back out, it's not going to be as sweet, because these are going to be your brethren. It may even be your mother. It may be your uncle. Somebody that's close to you. You may have to tell them, what saith the Lord? And that's very difficult. But go anyway. And we can go on. We may not be like Isaiah. You may not be like even Isaiah. We call him the eagle-eyed prophet. Or you may be like him among a lot of evil people. In other words, that's what it was. When Uzziah was around, he was around evil people. He saw all this. And when God called him, he says, no, I'm not worthy. None of us are worthy of ourselves. That's right. But this is the whole thing. But God said, and then the angel came and took a coal from the fire and touched his lips and says, who will go for us? And he says, Lord, here am I. Send me. Yes, sir. But when you say that, think about that. Look what Isaiah had to go through. In other words, when you say send me, you're saying a whole bunch of stuff. You're saying, Lord, whatever I have to face because of these unruly people, I'm willing to accept it. I don't know all what it is, but I'm willing to go through with it because why? You've touched my lips. I've eaten the roll. And I know how sweet it is. And I know I've seen the vision. Isaiah saw things coming, which he didn't totally all understand himself. But he saw it and he wrote it down. Now we're coming around to this time right now. What is it that we have? We have all the patriots of old. What they've done, what they've been through. We've seen that. We see what way is to go. We know what we can do and what we can't do. We know, the privilege that we have in Christianity. There is very little room for us if we don't make it. Why? Because we have so much. I have Jesus' words here. They're even in red. I mean, they were happy just to get some words. But we have it in red. And not only that, what is this? I have a concordance back here if I want to look up something. There's very little excuse for me. And what I want to say, I spoke about a deacon. Yes, I am a deacon. And I have a responsibility. The pastor asked me, he saw something that I didn't see. And with me being obedient, I accepted. Now, after looking at what Paul had written down to Timothy, because he told Timothy, yes, I want to come and see you, but just in case I don't see you, but let me tell you what you are to do and how you are to set things in order. And he talked about the responsibilities of first he started about a bishop. This is an overseer of me. Now, they went on down and they want to talk about a deacon. This is where I come in. This is what am I. In other words, deaconos, that's the Greek word for deacon that we translate as deacon. And I stand in pretty good company because the first one was Stephen, and he was so great, his words were so great that he disrupted the whole court to the point that they tore their clothes and stoned him. And you know what? My God, Jesus was so impressed with him. We see that Jesus was sitting on the throne, but when Stephen saw him, he said he was standing. And he says, I see him. He's standing. In other words, as they stoned him, he says, Lord, forgive them, for they know not what they do. They are stoning me. Don't hold this to their charge. They're ignorant. Amen. And you know why they were ignorant? They were ignorant. That's because we could be there. God blinded the minds of many of the Jews such that he could graft the Gentiles in. I'm a Gentile. You're a Gentile. In other words, let's not be so hard at thinking that we are so good. God still loved the Jews. In other words, and if God cut the Jews off that didn't believe, what will he do to us if we don't believe? So all I'm saying is this. This is my responsibility. What am I? I'm to be grave. Meaning that, in other words, I am to take this responsibility very solemnly and soberly. In other words, it says I'm not to be double-tongued. In other words, I don't talk about you. In other words, whatever I have to say about you, I have to say it to you. In your face or in your company. In other words, and if I do say something about you and you're not there, and then you come and confront me, I cannot come say, oh, I didn't say that. Yeah. In other words, whatever I say about you, I'm willing to say it in front of you and not in front of you. Amen. And it says, not much wine. Well, in my case, I look at it this way. If something offends my brother, I won't do it. Wine is one of these things that's still controversial about whether we do it or not. And wine now, they're making wine to be strong. They're making wine to be weak. They're going to do it here. And who is to say? In other words, scientists have, come up and indicated that wine has a lot to do with one's personality. Some people have an addictive personality. Who is to say that one drink won't cause you to be an alcoholic? None of us can say that. So then what I'm going to do, I'm not going to be an example to you to say, well, I could drink it and be okay. And you may be able to say, well, if he can do it, let me do it. And then all of a sudden, boom, you're gone. Whose blood will be on my hand? Mine. His blood would be on me because I know better. To whom much is given, much is required. So, and it goes on to say, holding the mystery of the faith in a pure conscience. The mystery of the faith. Think about this. It sounds, when you think about what does it take to be saved? All I have to do is confess with my mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in my heart that God raised him from the dead, I'm going to be saved. That sounds so crazy. Matter of fact, it sounds too simple. I'm not going to use that to try and deceive you. I'm not going to come up and try and tell you, no, you're going to have to go up there and do this. You're going to have to bring me a little $10 up here. You're going to have to bring some more money. You're going to have to do this. You're going to have to stand on one foot and then dance around. In other words, no. The mystery of this faith is so simple. Hold it in a pure conscience. Keep it like tell the people what is right and what is wrong. If it even hurts me, I have to tell it anyway. Keep it in a pure conscience. And then you know what? Then I grow. You grow. And then you know that, in other words, though I may be speaking up here, it doesn't mean that no way that I am without sin. I stumble. I don't like to say without, I know the Bible says that we're not sin. I don't want to use the word sin. I will stumble. But you know the difference, like what the pastor said. Though I may stumble, I'm not down. All I'm doing is getting up, or I'm all staying up. So this is the thing. If you stumble, know why you stumble. Why? Because there's a light that is shining. That, in other words, the only reason why you stumble because you're not on the road where the light is. You get back on that road where the light is. And be careful of being stumbling too, because there are certain things we could do in this life we may not ever be forgiven for by the kids, by people. God will forgive you, but some people ain't gonna ever forget. Yeah. And so, in other words, and you will always have to carry that. So I really believe this is why it says, be not many masters, knowing that you're going to suffer the greater offense. Why? Because if you don't do something in deed, you're going to say something in words. Somebody is going to be offended. But the thing is this: don't let them be offended because you're a busybody. If they're offended because of the gospel, that's not on you. Jesus, in other words, if you suffer for the gospel's sake, that's when you should rejoice. But if you suffer because of something you said and you know it was wrong, then that's on you too. Okay, so, and it goes on and says that test, and I just didn't become a deacon. This is what the pastor did. He said, test them for a time period and see if they still believe as they did in the beginning. Because this is just something in me that I have. I hear what people say when they come up and they're coming to the Lord, and I'm happy for them, but I don't jump around. I want to see what they're doing a year from now. Then I can know what they're doing, because I've seen a lot, and I haven't been here that long. I've been here about 24 years, 25, 23 years, and I've seen people see a whole bunch of things. They come and they go. And I've seen people promise a whole bunch of things, and I haven't seen nothing come to pass. So in other words, I don't get excited what they say. And I know, and because when you're up here and you're listening and people are talking to you, you get excited. And you can say things because it sounds good, then they start jumping up and down. You get more excited. That is just your flesh getting upset. Okay, but don't let that be what you are. Last thing, it says that I have to be the husband of one wife. One wife. Yeah. And you know what? And that's the thing. And when they said husband of one wife, in other words, remember when this is written, it was as if people back then, that's what they all did. They had wives. In other words, it doesn't matter. In other words, they may have 2 wives or 3 wives. In other words, they didn't have, no, more or less have a little girlfriend. They just married and called them wife. But we said we don't have one. You have one, which means there ain't no room for no girlfriends. Only one. And and I thank God for my wife. Because why? I could not be a deacon because look what it says about her. She has to be grave. That's right. So I'm not here by myself. Right. You're not here by yourself. In other words, you're just as strong as your mate. If your mate is weak, you're not as strong as what you think you are. So in other words, this is why you both grow together. You don't grow separately. In other words, it's not good, especially I put it for the man because he's the head, for the man to be here and his wife not there by his side. I'm just saying. And now on the wife's side, that's different because she is not in control of the man. But the husband, your wife should be with you in what you do. In other words, she knows that I'm a deacon. In other words, there's sometimes, in other words, she does this because I am getting old in her sight. And and she doesn't want me going too much because of how far I live. And there's some Thursday nights she says, baby, you can't go. But then there's some nights I have to go because there is something happening that I'm expected to be there. Why? Because somebody else is looking, or because of something I said. And she'll look at me and says, okay, and go on. But then there are other nights when I don't have anything, you won't see me on Thursday night. Yeah. And so all I'm saying, think about this. What is your gift? Now, and you know this, if we go to 1 Corinthians, God gave a lot of spiritual gifts. And these spiritual gifts are the ones that can manipulate and control your physical gift. And you know what the spiritual gifts, I looked at it, there are 9 that's put on here. 9. One is wisdom. It starts off with wisdom. And you know what? I really think that's at the top because what happened? When Solomon was made king, what was the first thing he did? He says, Lord, give me wisdom so I can lead these great people. And that's what God did. You have wisdom, and wisdom, is knowing how to really rightly divide the word of truth or put the knowledge out. And then you have knowledge. That means, where does knowledge come from? That comes from living a while. That comes from studying. That comes from reading. That comes from understanding and talking to people. And then you go on, and then it says another one is faith. Look at this. Faith is a gift. We all have a measure, but some has greater faith than others. And they really believe that. Believe certain things can happen, and their faith is great. In other words, and all this is necessary for the body to be whole. And it says faith, and after that, another, the gift of healing. Some has the working of miracles. Some has prophecy. And here's another one that we don't hear too much now of, is discerning of spirits. Another, different tongues. To another, the interpretation of tongues. All these are things that was working in the church and probably still working in a lot of our churches now. All I'm saying, when you have these, then your physical gift or your material gift, that for this life that we have, it can then be honed in the right direction. Amen. And I thank God for that, because when I had the business that the pastor prayed for and that didn't work, it wasn't the pastor, but I had the wrong intention. And I know now I had the wrong intention. I didn't know then I had the wrong intention, because I didn't really know how to, if it prospered, how to use the money that it would have generated. And how did I learn that? By me losing everything. I hope that you don't have to go through that. Yeah, because in other words, it's not an easy thing. Yeah, because your wife, in other words, you may have a mate that may not stick with you. In other words, and you may not have the fortitude to really go through. But and now going back, and this is in my closing, is that I want to say one reason that I came back up, I had something that this world needed. I had a degree. And in that degree, I was good in mathematics and science. And I had not worked for 10 years on a regular company. And I went out, and I didn't know what I was going to do. My daughter, this is another thing. Your kids are very important. Raise them up in a way that they should go. My daughter came to me and says, why don't you go into teaching? Because you're good at that. She saw that then. I didn't know that. And so I went, I took the test, and they hired me right away. Why? I didn't have a teaching credential. They gave me an emergency credential. Why? Because of math and science, something that they needed and was very hard to find. Whatever you're going into, go into something that the world needs. You may like birdhouse building, but it ain't much, jobs in birdhouse building. Go into something that, in other words, is not as many. There's a lot of opportunities in medicine. A lot of that. People living longer and everything like this. In other words, there's a lot in science, a lot in math. Go into that. And you'll be surprised as how your kids will be impacted. My son, I didn't know he was going to go into whether he talked about he wasn't going to do this. He went into engineering. My two granddaughters, I didn't know what they're going into. One is going into biomechanical engineering. The other one is going into computer science. That's what they're doing. Then I have another one going, my grandson, he's going into financing, economics. We need all these. One thing in other words, entrepreneurship. We need people that can make jobs and have companies, because all our kids are not going to college and they're going to mess up. But when they get 23 or 24 years old, then they find out, hey, I want to do better. There's nobody out there to hire them. So we have to think about our future, our kids. And this is what I'm trying to teach my kids, that you to be an entrepreneur such that you could hire some kids that do not make it, but yet they have turned their life around because now they see the folly of their ways. Now, I can't save everybody, but the thing is this. Those that want to be saved, just said what Jesus said. Those that want to be saved will be saved. Those that want to know his name will be known his name. So I just want to leave this with you. Entrepreneurship is very important for us because we're the only race that we don't have businesses. We used to have businesses, but we sold them all. We used to have hair businesses. In other words, the Asians know more about our hair than we know. Yeah. All I'm saying is this. Hey, and you know what? You can't get into that business. They will not sell to you. Once they get in there, and it's the same thing with our food. In other words, they can make the food taste just as good as we made it. But I want to teach somebody maybe want to be a cook, a culinary, go to school, become a culinary artist, and then you could go up. In other words, all these things. You want to be a musician, go to a school, learn the notes, and so you can read music. In other words, because we have great talent. I mean, can you imagine? I don't understand how anybody can go and be able to do this. One hand is going over here, another one. I can't do that. But let them go to school. Because one thing about it, I don't care how good you are, unless you're extraordinary, that you still won't be hired unless you have that paper. Praise the Lord. God bless. And again, yeah. Thank you. Yeah.